Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Something special for you, a whole new chapter for Cliff Harvey RC planes. It's not going to be RC actually. I'm really lucky because there's a chap who lives not far from me, I do believe, I haven't met him yet, called Andrew, who used to fly a lot of round the pole planes back in the day, probably 30, 40 years ago. And he had a collection of small aircraft, and guess what? They've been sitting gathering dust in his garage for at least 10 years, and they've come my way, and I'm going to restore them and get them flying. So we're going to have loads of fun this summer in the back garden. The benefit of his planes are they're quite heavy, so I should be able to fly them in a bit of a wind, which I can't do currently with my Redder control models because they're so light they get blown about. So let me show you what I've got. Well, first of all, let me read you a little covering letter he sent with the plane. This is my collection, a pylon included. I'll just pre-see it. He's explaining a model train transformer was connected to the pylon to provide power down the line and then back down copper lines to the aeroplane. The aeroplane, by the way, has like Scalextrics motors in them, and you've got a speed controller to regulate the flow of voltage and hence the speed climbing or diving. The voltage has to be transformed. He says all the aircraft were flown many times and they may be of some interest to someone. They certainly are. Most of the aircraft were modified Keelcraft kits. He then goes on to say he bought most of the equipment from Ballards of Tunbridge Wells, which specialised in round the pole equipment. And he's also included a Ballards brochure, which I think I also had when I was a teenager. And this brochure shows you all the equipment, aeroplanes built up, solid sheet, controllers, motors, and interestingly, the mains transformers. These are top of the range ones, quite expensive in the day. I mean, this is going back to probably the 80s. It's £90 for the top of the range ones. So yeah, not a cheap bit of kit. This big one suitable for single or dual models with lines up to 10 meters, which is a fantastic circle. But my garden, most I can get in is 4.5 meters, but that's a decent circle. When Ballard's finished, it was taken over by Phil over at the RTP hut, round the pole hut, and he's got all the equipment that you'd ever want for round the pole. And so I contacted Phil, and he did put me on to an eBay listing for a controller like I just showed you there. Now Phil does sell controllers, 3 different sizes depending on your line length, but he said you might want to look at this one online, which was very, very good of him to sort of potentially lose a sale, and in fact he did. However, I am promoting Phil and the RTP hut, and I'll link it below in the description because I've spoken to him before and he's a really helpful chap. So what did I get on eBay? Only a Ballards controller. In fact, this was the updated one because it's got the actual switchable current on it, so I can go all the way up to 48 volts depending on the length of the line. But I've got 2 outlets, so we're all set up. It's got an ammeter on the top as well, so we're all set up for round the pole. Just got to get the flying wires from Phil. So what aeroplanes did Andrew give me? So I'll cut to a picture here and you can see the range of aeroplanes. They're all First and Second World War fighters, and obviously I rather like the First World War ones. Mostly Second World War though. And the first one I'm going to have a look at today, right now on this video, is the SE5, which is badly damaged. It's only got the lower wing and it's been abused somewhat. Now all the models are covered in dust, so they need a fair amount of cleaning and then see if the motors work. Oh, actually, what else did Andrew say? He says he's flown some of his current aircraft on 3 meter lines on 12 volts. So I should be flying on 4.5 meter lines, so I'll be able to pump the voltage up until it gets to, because you get a lot of loss in the lines going down. Hope someone will be able to put them to good use and have a bit of fun, which is of course what I like to do on this channel. It's all about fun. So in actual fact, let me bend you down and just show you what this aeroplane looks like and how I'm going to progress. Cheers guys. Exciting, isn't it? Now you can see I'm building something here, but before I show you that, don't look. Let me show you the first model I'm working on, SE5. Very poorly, probably the worst of the lot. That's an easy fix. A little bit on the axle wants gluing back, a little bit of the exhaust is flapping around and the wings are warped. But the major thing, of course, it's a biplane and it's missing a top wing. So I went on to AutoZone, found the Keelcraft plan, downloaded it. I'll link to the AutoZone plan if you want to take a look at it yourself. Designed, I didn't know, by Albert E. Hatful, who is a very well-known Keelcraft designer. With the plan, I was able to pop you up there in a minute. With the plan, I was able to cut out some bits. This is all bits, ribs and trailing edge, leading edge, etc. And I put a wing together, one wing half already. Went together really quickly. Of course, there's nothing to it. It's all built from the scrap box basically, and that will go up. I've got balsa struts. They'll go in there and go up to the top wing. So there's one top wing built. So it's well on the way. Well on the way. Pop that one up there. And I'm just going to put the bits together. So I've got to build the top wing, port, starboard, and also a centre section to join the two parts together. So really easy construction, flies together, there's nothing to it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll cut these gussets in the corners before I put on the main spar, I think. First thing I'm going to do is just sand a flat on that main spar so as it sits nice and square onto the wingtip itself. What I'll do now, guys, is I'll just make up the centre section, and then when that's done I'll come back to you. Anyway then guys, all three components. So little centre section, didn't take a minute to put together. So these will then join like that. And we got ourselves a top wing. I'll sand the leading and trailing edges, and then I'll straighten out the wings on the model. Yeah, there we are. Nearly back together. That was fun. I enjoyed that. The other thing I've got to do is to clear out these broken struts. Now I could run one down the inside of this one if it doesn't want to come out. What's that? That's just paper on the top. That was snapped off clean. It does feel loose at the bottom, and I think I get access to it. Can I? That one out. It's coming. There we go. So that will pull out, and that looks familiar, doesn't it? That's the bottom end of a strut. Matches mine. Okay, so we've got. I can put my struts in now. All 4 holes there. All done. So I've just got to steam this wing slightly just to get it a little bit better, and that one's the opposite direction. Right then guys, I'm going to continue with the SE5. I've just picked any old colour because I'm going to paint it. So brown top wing, cover the bottom first, and we'll cover it, I'm going to use a glue stick. This is not blue unfortunately, it's just white, but it'll do the job. So I've sanded the structure. First thing to do is to pop on the glue stick. Let's put a bit of paper down a minute. So it's sanded, but there's 3 components, the 2 outers in the centre section, and I want to cover it with glue stick. Cover each part first before I glue them together. This makes life a bit easier covering them. Now I wouldn't normally stick it down to the ribs, but on this rib here I will have to, because it's where the struts fit in, and I've got to cut the tissue slightly. Get it reasonably taut. I think I'll just let that dry a little bit and come back to it in a minute. It'll cut easier then. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run some glue stick around the outside edge and put it on like that. Sometimes the wingtips can be a little bit difficult to do, and sometimes it's worth doing because they sort of pucker around. It's worth doing the wingtips in a separate part. Yeah, I'll tell you what, let's do the wingtip separately, shall we? So let's put the wingtip on first, and then you get a lovely tight piece of tissue around the corner. So that will go on there. You can put the tissue on wet, is another way of doing it, but this is more controlled if you're less experienced. Don't go crazy with the glue stick. So all I'm doing is concentrating on getting a nice, reasonably taut around the edges. Something else you want to be aware of, especially on the leading edge, is if you put glue all over the leading edge, you'll stick the tissue down before it has a chance to go up over the rib. So just try and focus on the actual edge and not the actual balsa wood flat piece. So I'm going to cut that to about 1/16 just to wrap it around the edge. You want to have a new scalpel blade in as well for tissuing. And hold the blade down at an angle like that. Don't hold it up, else you're more likely to snag it, tear it, especially if you put it on wet. Right, now this is going to go like that, and the rest is going to stick on like that. So I've got to get a nice line along the edge of that rib, and I don't want to get, let's just turn you slightly. I don't want to get glue all over the trailing edge, because I say the tissue will stick down onto it and then go up, and it just won't look too good. So I'm just going to glue the very edge like that. Sometimes if it's a big rib or curved rib, you might want to cut a curve in that just to match the rib as it goes around. Sometimes it just needs to be curved. So I'm not sticking it down to any of the internal structure, just the outer edge. Now I'm going to trim this, and I'm going to trim it so as it can just curl around the trailing edge where the actual glue is anyway. Notice how I'm stroking it off the trailing edge, so as the glue only actually goes on the bit that needs it. If it's glued and it's not coming off, that's great. So I could just go along, but then I'm going to end up with glue everywhere. Oops, pulled off there. Look. Here's a little tip for you. I was showing. If it's pulling away there and you can't grip the tissue, especially if it's wet, just use a nail file stick, and it just grips the tissue just enough to pull it without tearing. You've got to be very careful if it's wet tissue, if you should be putting it on wet. Right, let's let that set a little bit there. There's the sections made. I'll have to let them dry. I'll give them a spritz of water, and the water will tighten it out. I won't go crazy, it only needs a small amount of water sprayed on, and then I'll put some dope on. But for that they'll need to be weighted down a little bit because they'll warp otherwise. But I can always straighten them out again in the steam anyway. Right, we'll put those there, tidy the bench, and when they're dry we'll spritz them with water. I spritzed it with water. They tightened out reasonably well. This one maybe not as good as the others, but not too bad. And what I'm going to do now is to give them a doping. These bits of balsa wood, I'll put sellotape on so they don't stick. That's the theory. I was wondering if I ought to stick them together once I'm putting them on the aeroplane, whether I should mount the centre section on these struts and then put the other struts in and glue the wing to it after it's been doped up. It's an idea, isn't it? Or should I dope them up, glue them together, and then try and offer it all in one go? Now you need to do both surfaces at once to stop them warping up, and let it dry for a second before I put it down. The stick shouldn't stick to it because, as I say, I've got sellotape on. If I go back to this one, look, you can see it's virtually dry along the edges now. Doesn't take long and it's thinned down. But what I'll do, I'll finish this one off and get it weighed down. Not putting too much pressure on the front there. Okay, let's just weigh that down, knowing that it's not going to stick. Not only that, but I can move it to the edges a little bit more anyway. Sticking to my fingers though. Okay, let's let that set. The reason we dope is to seal the pores of the tissue, which makes it more aerodynamic. But it also tightens out the fabric. You know, applies to full size as well as models. Yeah, on there. Not actually on the tissue, but on the wood, even on the rib. Okay, I'll do the last one and I'll be right back. So it's had 2 coats of dope, and now they're ready for a lick of green paint. I think I would like to do it in 3 separate sections. It'd be a lot more controlled. So that's what I'm going to do. Right, let's quick look at the plan and see if we can identify which struts go where. That will go in that hole there and down. I see where it pegs in at the bottom. I think I'm going to have to fix the centre section and slide that one in afterwards and glue it, because it's not going to bend quite around. It might bend a little bit, but I'd sooner not put it in under tension. So what I think I'll do is I'll just CA those in place. There we go. Okay, that's the rear struts touched in with CA, and it looks, it's got a positive angle of attack there, so, and that looks pretty much the same there, so I'm kind of happy with that. We'll go and put some white glue around it later, but for the minute. Okay, now I think this one is going to have to, basically I might have to trim it down and then glue it to the block. Whether the original one was like that, I don't know, but that's what I'm probably going to have to do. Like that. That's pretty solid. Lines up okay. How satisfying is this to get the model flying again? Okay, that's the centre section in. But I see it as I see this project as a sort of a challenge. As soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, I'm going to enjoy building a wing to go on there. Right, there it is. So we've got strut M goes to the back, and that's that one there. That's there, and then that will glue onto there, and that really does line up awfully well. So it's got the right dihedral. What about that then, guys? Half. Cool. Doesn't that look fantastic? I'll tell you what, there's no better feeling than aero modelling while it's raining. The rain's pattering against the window there. Lovely thing to hear. I think trying to get this on in one swoop with all the struts would have been a little bit tricky. There we are. What's wrong with that? I noticed when I turned it over just now it had roundels on the bottom, so I might end up putting some roundels on the top. And that goes there, that goes there. The top wing is incredibly true, which is fantastic for me. Right then guys, let's just leave that for an hour or two, let it settle down. We'll come back, we'll have a look and put a bit more white glue here and there if it's needed. Let's get it painted. Let's get it painted. We'll start with the underneath, I think. It's very different, isn't it? Very different. Thing is, it's closer than the brown, isn't it? And it means that there's a story behind this aeroplane now. Thing. See, I put a windshield on it. Windshield. Okay, let's paint the top. See what we think. I actually prefer it as a green. It's a nicer camouflage colour, so it's not such a sickly green. Can't judge it until it's dry, because these things do dry slightly different colour, but no, it's very different, isn't it? I mean, we can see that. Well, I think that looks fantastic after it having no top wing and the wings were warped. I think that looks beautiful. It's the classic archetypal biplane, isn't it? The SE5. And I think that's going to look really, really lovely. Definitely worth putting on. I'll just cut out the other one. Don't they finish a wing off, don't they? The dry clear and the matte varnish will finish it off. And there. Rest looks okay. Okay guys, what about that? I'm happy with that, that's good. So like I say, I'll give it a quick fizz of matte lacquer just to hold it in, and that would be the top wing replaced. Now she's ready to fly again. So we're one step closer to round the pole flying this spring with this fleet of aeroplanes I've inherited. So yeah, really happy with that. Wings come out really nice. Give the video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, and now I'm going to start my next project. Cheers guys.